Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. It was an unusually cold, gray morning in a small Texas town. Mark Davis, a 23-year-old law student, walked briskly down the street with a heavy backpack slung over his shoulder. His mind was a whirlwind of stress: looming exams, mounting debts, and a constant struggle to keep his head above water after his father's untimely death. He barely noticed the drizzle turning to a light rain as he walked past the elegant restaurant. The world felt heavy around him, like the sky itself was pressing down on his shoulders. Mark's phone buzzed. He pulled it out and saw an unknown number flashing across the screen. He hesitated before answering. "Mr. Davis?" A calm, composed voice came through the line. "This is Eleanor Brooks. I'd like to meet with you. It's regarding your financial situation." He frowned, his confusion apparent. "Who are you? How do you know about that?" "I know enough," she replied smoothly. "Meet me at Brooks Bistro at 7 p.m. It's important." The call ended before Mark could protest. He stared at the screen for a moment before slipping his phone back into his pocket. This was strange. Why would someone he didn't know want to talk to him about his finances? But curiosity gnawed at him, and he found himself agreeing to the meeting without quite knowing why. Hours later, Mark stood outside the upscale restaurant. The evening was dark, and the rain had started to come down harder, but he didn't mind. The warm glow of the restaurant beckoned him inside. As soon as he entered, he was greeted by a hostess and escorted to a private table in the corner. He couldn't help but feel out of place. The fine china, the crisp tablecloth, and the soft hum of elegant conversation felt like another world from his daily struggles. And then, there she was. Eleanor Brooks sat across from him. She was an older woman, probably in her late 60s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and an aura of power that was impossible to ignore. Her gray hair was perfectly styled, and she wore a dark, tailored suit that screamed wealth. Mark felt an awkward pang of discomfort as he took his seat, suddenly realizing how little he belonged in this world. "Mr. Davis," she said smoothly, her gaze never leaving his. "I know about your situation. Your debts, your family's struggle. And I'm here to offer you a solution." Mark blinked, unsure if he heard her correctly. "What kind of solution?" Her lips curled into a faint smile, as if she had already anticipated his question. "I'm offering you a contract marriage. You will marry me, and in return, I will take care of your debts, ensure your financial security, and give you the life you deserve. But in return, you must agree to remain by my side, in name only, for 1 year. No love, no romantic commitment, just a business agreement." Mark sat there, stunned. The offer was so outrageous, he almost laughed. But there was something about Eleanor's serious demeanor that made him think she wasn't joking. He took a deep breath, the weight of his situation pressing on him harder than ever. He had nothing to lose. His mother's medical bills were piling up, and his sister's tuition was just around the corner. This was a way out, a way to provide for them all. Mark nodded slowly, unable to find the words to refuse. "I'll do it," he said, his voice barely a whisper. Little did he know, agreeing to this business arrangement would set him on a path that would change his life forever. Stay tuned to see how Mark's life takes a turn he never expected. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. It was an unusually cold, gray morning in a small Texas town. Mark Davis, a 23-year-old law student, walked briskly down the street with a heavy backpack slung over his shoulder. His mind was a whirlwind of stress: looming exams, mounting debts, and a constant struggle to keep his head above water after his father's untimely death. He barely noticed the drizzle turning to a light rain as he walked past the elegant restaurant. The world felt heavy around him, like the sky itself was pressing down on his shoulders. Mark's phone buzzed. He pulled it out and saw an unknown number flashing across the screen. He hesitated before answering. "Mr. Davis?" A calm, composed voice came through the line. "This is Eleanor Brooks. I'd like to meet with you. It's regarding your financial situation." He frowned, his confusion apparent. "Who are you? How do you know about that?" "I know enough," she replied smoothly. "Meet me at Brooks Bistro at 7 p.m. It's important." The call ended before Mark could protest. He stared at the screen for a moment before slipping his phone back into his pocket. This was strange. Why would someone he didn't know want to talk to him about his finances? But curiosity gnawed at him, and he found himself agreeing to the meeting without quite knowing why. Hours later, Mark stood outside the upscale restaurant. The evening was dark, and the rain had started to come down harder, but he didn't mind. The warm glow of the restaurant beckoned him inside. As soon as he entered, he was greeted by a hostess and escorted to a private table in the corner. He couldn't help but feel out of place. The fine china, the crisp tablecloth, and the soft hum of elegant conversation felt like another world from his daily struggles. And then, there she was. Eleanor Brooks sat across from him. She was an older woman, probably in her late 60s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and an aura of power that was impossible to ignore. Her gray hair was perfectly styled, and she wore a dark, tailored suit that screamed wealth. Mark felt an awkward pang of discomfort as he took his seat, suddenly realizing how little he belonged in this world. "Mr. Davis," she said smoothly, her gaze never leaving his. "I know about your situation. Your debts, your family's struggle. And I'm here to offer you a solution." Mark blinked, unsure if he heard her correctly. "What kind of solution?" Her lips curled into a faint smile, as if she had already anticipated his question. "I'm offering you a contract marriage. You will marry me, and in return, I will take care of your debts, ensure your financial security, and give you the life you deserve. But in return, you must agree to remain by my side, in name only, for 1 year. No love, no romantic commitment, just a business agreement." Mark sat there, stunned. The offer was so outrageous, he almost laughed. But there was something about Eleanor's serious demeanor that made him think she wasn't joking. He took a deep breath, the weight of his situation pressing on him harder than ever. He had nothing to lose. His mother's medical bills were piling up, and his sister's tuition was just around the corner. This was a way out, a way to provide for them all. Mark nodded slowly, unable to find the words to refuse. "I'll do it," he said, his voice barely a whisper. Little did he know, agreeing to this business arrangement would set him on a path that would change his life forever. Stay tuned to see how Mark's life takes a turn he never expected. Mark stood in front of the luxurious mansion, feeling a mix of disbelief and nervous excitement. The long, winding driveway led up to the grand entrance, where Eleanor was already waiting for him. He felt completely out of place, like an intruder in a world he didn't belong to. The last few days had been a blur, signing the contract, agreeing to a year of a marriage in name only, and now, standing here, about to walk into a life that seemed like a dream or maybe a nightmare. "Mark, welcome," Eleanor's voice broke through his thoughts as she stepped forward to greet him. Her tone was calm, almost too calm, as though she had done this 100 times before. "I trust the house suits you?" He nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "It's stunning." He could barely believe the lavishness of it all. The mansion was grand, with high ceilings, marble floors, and antique furniture that spoke of wealth beyond anything he had ever imagined. "Good," she replied, smiling faintly. Please, make yourself at home. She gestured toward the entrance, leading him into the spacious foyer. The house felt cold, sterile, almost like it hadn't seen warmth or laughter in a long time. Eleanor moved gracefully through the space, completely at ease, while Mark trailed behind her, feeling like a fish out of water. They walked into a large dining room, where a lavish dinner was already set. Eleanor had made sure to prepare everything. Mark couldn't help but notice the contrast. His usual dinner was a quick sandwich or something from a corner shop, while this felt like a scene from a movie. As they sat down to eat, the conversation was polite but distant. Eleanor asked about his family, his studies, and his life before this agreement, but Mark found it hard to open up. The weight of the contract hung heavily between them, an invisible barrier that neither seemed willing to cross. They were strangers, pretending to be something more. After dinner, Eleanor suggested they take a walk around the garden. Mark hesitated but agreed, curious to see more of the estate. The night air was cool, and the moonlight cast a soft glow on the perfectly manicured lawns. As they strolled through the garden, Eleanor spoke again, her voice steady, but there was something different in it now. "Mark, I want to be clear about something," she began, stopping to face him. "This arrangement, it's a business deal, not a romantic one. But I expect you to be present at the events and maintain the appearance of a married couple." Mark nodded, unsure of what to say. He had known the terms of their agreement, but hearing it out loud made it feel so much more real. "I understand," he replied, his voice low. "I just need to make sure my family is taken care of." Eleanor studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable. "That's exactly why I'm offering you this opportunity. You're not here just for the money, Mark. You're here because I believe in your potential, and I want to help you find a better future." For a moment, Mark wondered if he was making a mistake. But the truth was, he had nothing to lose. His mother's health was deteriorating, and his sister's future was uncertain. This was his way out. He couldn't afford to back out now. The evening passed quietly, with Eleanor showing him to his room in the guest wing of the mansion. The room was beautiful, furnished with the finest pieces, but there was an emptiness to it that Mark couldn't ignore. It was hard to shake the feeling that, despite all the luxury, something was missing. The next morning, Mark woke to a sense of surrealism. He wasn't used to such extravagance, and yet here he was, living a life that seemed almost too perfect to be true. He got dressed in the clothes Eleanor had arranged for him, the tailored suit feeling both uncomfortable and necessary at the same time. When he came downstairs, he found Eleanor waiting for him, a new schedule in her hand. She outlined their plans for the day: meetings, social events, and appearances they would attend together, all to maintain the illusion of a real marriage. Mark was still struggling to adjust, but he nodded along, knowing this was his only chance to get ahead. As they prepared to leave for their first event together, Eleanor turned to him with a soft smile. "Remember, this is just a job, Mark. Keep your personal life separate. But, in public, we're a couple." Mark nodded, but a part of him couldn't help but wonder how long he could keep up this charade. The more he spent time with Eleanor, the more he started to see a side of her that wasn't just about business. She was strong, determined, but there was a loneliness behind her eyes, a kind of sadness that reminded him of his own struggles. The day passed in a whirlwind of social gatherings, all of them carefully orchestrated by Eleanor. As they attended a gala later that evening, Mark couldn't shake the feeling that he was playing a part in someone else's story. He was just another pawn in a game he didn't fully understand. But what neither he nor Eleanor could have anticipated was that as they danced under the glittering lights of the gala, something unexpected would begin to stir between them, something that neither of them had planned for. Stay tuned to find out what happens when the lines between business and real emotions begin to blur. As the days went by, Mark settled into a strange routine. His life, once simple and full of struggle, had transformed into something that seemed both surreal and impossible. Eleanor's world, filled with luxury and power, was now his, at least on the surface. He spent his days attending events, meetings, and public appearances, always by her side, playing the role of a husband in a marriage that was nothing more than a business arrangement. But as much as he tried to keep his feelings in check, he couldn't ignore the way Eleanor's presence began to affect him. He had expected their arrangement to be strictly professional, but there was something about her, something warm and genuine that he couldn't quite shake. Despite the cold, businesslike demeanor she showed in public, there were moments when her guard would drop, and Mark could see the woman behind the powerful CEO. It was during one of those moments, just a week into their new life together, that he found himself noticing how much he had begun to care. It was a quiet evening when Eleanor invited him to join her for dinner in her private dining room. The house felt emptier than usual, the silence between them louder. As they sat down to eat, the tension in the air was palpable. Eleanor was being unusually quiet, her thoughts seemingly far away. Mark, too, was lost in his own mind, wondering whether it was possible for someone like him to truly belong in a world so far removed from everything he had known. "Mark," Eleanor said suddenly, breaking the silence. Her voice was softer than usual, almost as if she was hesitant to speak. "You've been acting different lately. I can tell you're not just here for the arrangement. Are you regretting our deal?" Mark's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't realized how much his feelings had shifted, but now that she had pointed it out, he couldn't deny it. "No," he replied quickly, more to reassure himself than her. "I'm just adjusting. This is a lot to take in." Eleanor studied him for a moment, her sharp eyes searching his face. She had always been able to read people with uncanny accuracy, but there was something different in her expression now. It was almost as if she was testing him, weighing his words. "I don't want you to feel trapped, Mark," she said, her voice low. "This deal is supposed to help you, not hurt you. You're free to walk away at any time if you change your mind. I won't stop you." Mark paused, the weight of her words hanging in the air. She was offering him an escape, but could he really walk away? Was this the life he wanted, or had he gotten in too deep? But as he looked at her, something in his chest tightened. He didn't want to leave. Not yet. He had started to understand her in ways he never thought he would, and the more time he spent with her, the more he realized that this marriage, fake or not, had begun to feel real in ways he hadn't expected. "I'm not going anywhere," he finally said, his voice steady, though his heart raced. "I made a promise, and I intend to keep it." Eleanor smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes for the first time since their arrangement had begun. It was a rare sight, and Mark couldn't help but be moved by it. For the first time, he wondered if maybe, just maybe, he wasn't the only one feeling this way. The next few days brought even more challenges. Eleanor's company was under scrutiny by the media, and they had to maintain the appearance of a perfect couple even more than before. The pressure was mounting, but it was also bringing them closer together. Mark started to realize that their partnership was becoming more than just a business arrangement. They were beginning to depend on each other in ways that went beyond the contract. One evening, after another long day of public appearances, Eleanor invited Mark to sit with her on the balcony overlooking the city. The lights below twinkled like stars, but the quiet between them was still heavy. "Mark, I never expected you to actually stick around," Eleanor admitted, her voice soft. "Most people would have taken the money and run, but you're different." He looked at her, surprised. "Why would I leave? You've done more for me than anyone else ever has." Eleanor turned to him, her expression unreadable. "I'm not the easiest person to be around, Mark. But you see me. You don't just see the CEO or the businesswoman. You see the person underneath all of that. And that means more to me than you know." Mark felt a surge of emotion he couldn't explain. It was as if, in that moment, they were no longer just two people pretending to be married for convenience. They were something more, something real. He could feel it in the way she looked at him, the way her walls were slowly starting to come down. "Eleanor," he said softly, "I think I'm starting to understand why I'm really here. It's not just about the money or the contract. I'm here because I care about you. More than I should." She looked at him for a long moment, her gaze intense. Then, for the first time, she reached out and took his hand. "I care about you too, Mark," she whispered. And in that moment, everything shifted. Their lives, which had once been so separate, began to intertwine in a way neither of them had expected. Stay tuned to see what happens when love starts to blossom in the most unexpected of places. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions and events that Mark wasn't sure how to handle. The more time he spent with Eleanor, the more he realized how deeply his feelings for her had grown. The contract they had signed, which had once seemed like a simple business arrangement, was starting to blur the lines between reality and pretense. He found himself looking forward to the moments they shared, and he couldn't help but wonder if she felt the same way. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day of meetings and public events, Eleanor invited him to dinner at the mansion. The tension between them had been building for days, and it was clear that something was about to change. Mark couldn't ignore the way his heart raced whenever she looked at him, or how he found himself thinking about her even when they weren't together. As they sat down at the dinner table, Eleanor seemed more distant than usual. Her eyes, normally sharp and confident, were clouded with something Mark couldn't quite place. He waited for her to speak, his own thoughts swirling in his mind. "Mark," Eleanor said, her voice softer than usual, almost hesitant. "I need to talk to you about something. Something important." Mark's heart skipped a beat. He wasn't sure if he was ready to hear whatever it was she had to say. But he nodded, setting his fork down and giving her his full attention. "I've been thinking," Eleanor continued, her voice trembling slightly, "about what this whole arrangement means. We've been pretending for so long, and now I don't know what's real anymore." Mark's pulse quickened. He had been feeling the same way, but hearing her voice crack made him realize how much this had affected her too. "I'm not asking for anything, Mark," she said, her eyes avoiding his. "But I can't keep pretending that this is just a business deal. I thought I could, but I'm not so sure anymore." He felt a weight settle in his chest. It wasn't just Eleanor questioning their arrangement, it was him, too. The more time he spent with her, the more he realized he wasn't just pretending. He was falling in love with her. "Eleanor," Mark said quietly, his voice steady, "I don't know how we got here, but I'm starting to feel the same way. I never expected this. I thought it was just about money, about security, but it's more than that now. I care about you." She looked up at him, her eyes wide with surprise, as if she hadn't expected him to say it. There was a long silence between them, heavy with unspoken words. "I care about you too, Mark," she finally whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "But I don't know what this means. I don't know if I can trust it. I've been hurt too many times to believe that love can happen like this." Mark's heart broke for her. He knew she had been through a lot, and her walls were high for a reason. But he couldn't ignore the way they had been drawn to each other, the way they had begun to depend on each other in a way that felt real. "I don't know what the future holds, Eleanor," Mark said, his voice soft but firm. "But I know that I want to be a part of it. I don't want to lose this. I don't want to walk away." She met his gaze, and for the first time in a long time, he saw something in her eyes, a flicker of hope, of possibility. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Because once we cross that line, there's no going back. Are you ready for that?" Mark nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. "I'm ready. If you are." The silence that followed was different from all the other silences they had shared. It wasn't awkward or heavy with uncertainty, it was filled with the promise of something more. Something real. They spent the rest of the evening talking, opening up to each other in ways they hadn't before. The walls between them began to crumble, piece by piece. And for the first time, Mark felt like he wasn't just playing a role in someone else's life, he was living his own story. The next few days were a blur of emotions as Mark and Eleanor navigated the shift in their relationship. It was no longer about pretending to be married, it was about finding a way to make it work, to make their connection real. But even as they grew closer, the world around them was starting to notice the cracks in their perfect facade. At a high-profile charity event that weekend, the media began to question the authenticity of their relationship. They couldn't avoid the spotlight forever, and Mark felt the pressure mounting. But as he stood by Eleanor's side, holding her hand in front of the cameras, he realized something that took him by surprise. He didn't care about what anyone else thought. He only cared about her. "Are you ready for this?" Eleanor whispered, her eyes scanning the crowd. Mark squeezed her hand, a reassuring smile on his face. "I am. We've got this." But little did they know, the real challenges were only just beginning. The truth about their relationship was about to be revealed in a way that neither of them could have predicted. Stay tuned to see how Mark and Eleanor face the challenges ahead and discover if their love can survive in the real world. The following week, things between Mark and Eleanor took a dramatic turn. The gala they had attended was the talk of the town, but not for the reasons they had hoped. Their marriage was now being scrutinized by the media, and rumors began to swirl about the true nature of their relationship. The pressure was unbearable, and the cracks in their carefully crafted facade were starting to show. Mark felt the weight of the public eye bearing down on him, but what was worse was how it seemed to be affecting Eleanor. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day, Mark found Eleanor in the library, her gaze distant as she stared at the flickering fire in the hearth. She hadn't said much all day, and the silence between them had become unbearable. "Eleanor," Mark said softly, approaching her. "We need to talk." She didn't look up right away, but when she finally did, there was an unfamiliar vulnerability in her eyes. "About what?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mark hesitated. He could tell she was struggling, torn between maintaining the illusion of their perfect marriage and facing the truth of their growing feelings for each other. "About everything," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "The media, the pressure, it's starting to feel like we're losing control. I know this was a business deal, but I can't ignore what's happening between us anymore." For a moment, Eleanor was silent. She seemed to be weighing his words, her mind racing. Finally, she spoke, her voice tinged with frustration and fear. "Mark, you don't understand," she said, her hands trembling slightly. "This is what I was trying to avoid. I've spent my whole life building this empire, this image, and now it's all falling apart. If the world finds out the truth that we've crossed the line, that this was never just business for might will destroy everything." Mark stepped closer, his heart aching at the sight of her so broken. He had always known that Eleanor was guarded, that she had been through more than her fair share of pain. But seeing her so vulnerable, so scared, made him realize just how much he cared for her. "Eleanor," he said, reaching out and gently taking her hand. "We can't keep living like this, pretending we're not in this together. If we want to make it through, we need to be honest with each other. No more pretending. No more walls." She pulled her hand back, the fear in her eyes now mixed with doubt. "What if we can't handle the truth?" she whispered. "What if it all falls apart?" Mark looked at her, determination in his eyes. "Then we'll deal with it. Together." Eleanor stared at him for a long moment, her chest rising and falling with each breath. She seemed to be searching for something in his eyes, some sign that he was serious, that he was truly ready to face whatever came next. Finally, she nodded, a single tear escaping down her cheek. "Okay," she said softly. "Together." The next few days were a blur of frantic preparations and public appearances, but the unspoken tension between Mark and Eleanor remained. They were both determined to face whatever came next, but the media was relentless, and their every move was being watched. At one of the final gala events, Mark could feel the weight of the cameras on him, the eyes of the world focused on their every move. It was supposed to be a night of celebration, but it felt more like a pressure cooker, about to explode. As they made their way through the crowd, Mark felt a hand slip into his. It was Eleanor, and for the first time in weeks, she didn't look at him with uncertainty. Instead, her grip was firm, her presence comforting. "I'm sorry," she whispered, leaning in close. "For everything. For not seeing this sooner. For being so afraid." Mark smiled, squeezing her hand. "You don't have to apologize," he said, his voice low. "We're in this together. Whatever happens, we face it together." And in that moment, something shifted between them. The world outside, the judgment, the pressure, they all seemed to fade away. For the first time, it wasn't about the business arrangement or the media frenzy, it was just the two of them, standing side by side, ready to face whatever the future held. But little did they know, the next twist of fate would bring a revelation that would change everything. The truth about their relationship, about their feelings for each other, would finally come to light in a way neither of them could have predicted. Stay tuned to find out how Mark and Eleanor confront the truth and whether their relationship can survive the chaos that's about to unfold. The days following the gala were filled with tension. Mark and Eleanor had made a decision to face the truth, but the world outside their bubble seemed determined to pull them apart. The media was relentless, and whispers about their relationship swirled through every corner of their social circles. It felt like they were constantly on edge, never knowing who to trust or what the next headline would say. The pressure weighed heavily on both of them, but in private, their connection grew stronger. They had crossed a line, but it was a line they didn't want to uncross. One evening, after a particularly stressful day, Eleanor called Mark into her office. The room was quiet except for the hum of the city outside, and as Mark stepped inside, he noticed the serious expression on her face. He had become used to the guarded look in her eyes, but tonight, it seemed different. She wasn't just the powerful CEO, she was a woman, vulnerable and uncertain, in need of something more. Mark, she began, her voice low, I've been thinking about our situation. The media, the pressure, and everything else. It's becoming too much. I don't know how much longer we can keep up this charade. Mark felt his heart sink. He had known this moment was coming. The world was watching them, and sooner or later, the truth would come out. But hearing it from Eleanor, the woman he had come to care about more than he had ever imagined, made the weight of their reality hit him all at once. I don't want to keep pretending either, Mark said, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. But I'm not going anywhere. Not now. Not after everything we've been through. We can't give up just because things are getting hard. Eleanor looked at him, her eyes searching his face as though she was looking for something. Something real. Something she hadn't been willing to face before. I don't want to lose you, she admitted quietly. But I also don't want to lose everything I've worked for. My career, my legacy. If the truth comes out, it could ruin everything. I can't afford that. Mark stepped closer, his heart aching for her. He had always known that her walls were high, but now, they were crumbling in front of him. This wasn't just about their fake marriage, Anna Marie, it was about trust, about the real connection they had started to form. Eleanor, he said softly, his voice filled with sincerity, this is about more than just appearances. I'm not asking you to give up everything. But you don't have to do this alone. We've got each other. Whatever happens, we'll face it together. There was a long pause as Eleanor absorbed his words. She took a deep breath, her shoulders slumping slightly as if a weight had been lifted, even if just for a moment. I don't know how to trust again, Mark, she whispered. I've been betrayed before, by people I thought I could count on. And I don't want to open myself up to that kind of pain again. Mark gently reached out, placing his hand on hers. I won't betray you, he said firmly. I can't promise that everything will be easy, but I can promise that I'll be here. And I'll stand by you, no matter what happens. Eleanor met his gaze, her eyes filled with a mixture of relief and uncertainty. For a moment, she looked like she might break down, but instead, she nodded. Okay, she said softly. We'll face it together. The next few days brought new challenges. The media continued to hound them, and rumors about their relationship reached new heights. But despite the pressure, Mark and Eleanor found themselves drawing closer. They spent more time together, and for the first time since their agreement began, they started to open up to each other about their pasts, their fears, and their hopes for the future. One evening, Eleanor took Mark to a quiet corner of the mansion's garden, far away from the prying eyes of the world. The air was cool, and the sound of the wind rustling the leaves created a peaceful backdrop. It was here, in this moment of calm, that Eleanor turned to him. Mark, she said softly, I've been thinking. Maybe this whole arrangement, maybe it's not as bad as I thought. Maybe it's a chance for us to be real with each other. Maybe it's a way for me to open up again, to trust someone for once. Mark smiled, his heart swelling at her words. I think we're already starting to be real with each other, Eleanor. And I'm here for it. I'm here for you. No more pretending. No more contracts. Just us. In that moment, Eleanor leaned in, her lips brushing against his in a soft kiss. It wasn't passionate or fiery, but it was everything they needed. A promise. A beginning. A new chapter. But even as they shared that kiss, they knew that the hardest part was still ahead. Their love, once a secret, was now a fragile thing that needed to be protected. And the world was watching. Stay tuned to see how Mark and Eleanor navigate the fallout from their decision to open their hearts and face the truth. Will their love survive the challenges ahead, or will the weight of their secrets tear them apart? The days following their quiet moment in the garden were filled with uncertainty. Mark and Eleanor had decided to face the truth, to stop pretending, but the world around them wasn't ready to let go of their perfect image. The media was relentless, and despite their best efforts to keep their relationship private, rumors continued to swirl. But what hurt even more than the headlines was the pressure it placed on their relationship. Eleanor had always been someone who kept her emotions tightly controlled, but now, Mark could see cracks in her armor. The fear of losing everything she had built was weighing heavily on her. One evening, after a long day of media scrutiny, Mark found Eleanor sitting alone on the balcony of the mansion, staring out over the city. The weight of the world seemed to hang on her every movement, and Mark couldn't help but feel that the distance between them was growing once again. He approached her slowly, his footsteps light on the marble floor. Eleanor, he said softly, his voice gentle. We need to talk. She turned to him, her face weary. About what? She asked, her voice tight. About all of this, Mark replied, his hand motioning toward the media frenzy outside. I know it's not easy. But we can't let the world tear us apart. Not after everything we've been through. Eleanor's eyes flickered with a mixture of frustration and fear. You don't understand, Mark. I've worked my entire life to get here, to build something I can be proud of, and now, everything is falling apart. People will question my every move, my every decision. I can't risk losing everything. Mark stepped closer, his heart aching for her. He had never seen her this vulnerable, this scared. You don't have to do it alone, he said softly. I'm here. I've got you. We've got this, together. Eleanor looked at him, her eyes filled with doubt. And what if we don't? She whispered, her voice breaking. What if we can't handle the pressure? What if all of this everything was just a mistake? Mark's chest tightened as he reached out, gently taking her hands in his. It's not a mistake, he said firmly. I'm here because I believe in us. I believe in you. And I'm not walking away. She looked at him for a long moment, as if searching for any sign of doubt. But there was none. Mark's words were genuine, and for the first time, Eleanor let herself believe them. She squeezed his hands, a small, fragile smile crossing her lips. Okay, she whispered. Together. But even as they made this promise to each other, the storm outside raged on. The next day, they faced the harsh reality of their situation. The media was relentless, and no matter how hard they tried to keep their personal lives out of the public eye, the truth was starting to seep through the cracks. At a charity event later that week, the tension was palpable. The press had been following them every step of the way, and Mark could feel their eyes on him. The whispers, the cameras, everything felt suffocating. He glanced over at Eleanor, who was speaking with a guest, her smile tight, her posture stiff. She was holding it together, but Mark could see how much the weight of everything was affecting her. As the night wore on, Mark found himself growing more and more uncomfortable. The spotlight was no longer flattering, it was a cage. And the more he tried to maintain the illusion of their perfect marriage, the more it seemed to unravel. Eleanor, too, was feeling the strain. She was no longer the confident, unshakable CEO. She was a woman afraid of losing everything she had fought for. That night, as they left the event, Mark could feel the tension between them. It wasn't the pressure from the media this time, it was the silent fear that lingered in the space between them. They both knew that their relationship, once a simple business arrangement, had become something real, but the question remained, could they survive the consequences of their truth? Stay tuned to see what happens when Mark and Eleanor are forced to confront the ultimate challenge. Can they protect what they have while facing the consequences of their choices? The tension between Mark and Eleanor was palpable as the days continued to pass. The media storm had not let up, and with each new headline, the pressure seemed to mount. Mark could see it in Eleanor's eyes, the weight of the world pressing down on her, making her more guarded and distant. She had always been the strong, composed CEO, but now, more than ever, Mark realized how much she was struggling to keep everything together. Despite their shared promise to face everything together, the cracks in their relationship were beginning to show. One evening, after another exhausting day of public appearances and interviews, Mark found Eleanor sitting alone in her office, staring out at the city skyline. The lights below twinkled, but there was a darkness in her expression that Mark hadn't seen before. "Eleanor?" Mark said softly, stepping into the room. "We need to talk." She didn't turn to face him at first, but after a few moments, she spoke, her voice strained. "I know what you're going to say. You're worried about me." Mark walked toward her, his heart aching. "I'm not just worried about you, Eleanor. I'm worried about us. We're falling apart. The world is watching us, and it's tearing us down. I can't stand seeing you like this." Eleanor turned slowly, her eyes locking with his. "What do you want me to do, Mark?" she asked, her voice rising slightly. "I can't control the media. I can't control what people say. I've spent my entire life building this company, this legacy, and now everything feels like it's slipping away. And I don't know how to stop it." Mark took a deep breath, his hand reaching out to gently touch hers. "We can't control everything, Eleanor. But we can control how we face it. Together." For a long moment, Eleanor didn't respond. She just stared at him, her face softening slightly, the walls she had built up beginning to crumble, just a little. Finally, she spoke, her voice quieter this time. "I'm scared, Mark," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been through so much already, and I can't lose everything now. I don't know how much more I can take." Mark stepped closer, his heart heavy with empathy. "I'm not asking you to do this alone. I'm here. And I'm not going anywhere." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears, and for the first time, she let herself lean into him. It was a small, fragile moment, but in it, Mark could feel the weight of everything they had both been carrying. She wasn't just the powerful CEO anymore. She was a woman who had been hiding her fears, her doubts, behind a mask of strength. They stood there in silence for a moment, the quiet of the room surrounding them. Then, slowly, Eleanor spoke again, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "What if I lose everything, Mark? What if this all falls apart?" Mark shook his head, his hand gently cupping her face. "We'll face it together. Whatever happens, we'll deal with it. But I won't let you lose yourself in all of this." Eleanor looked at him, her eyes searching his face, as if she was looking for some kind of reassurance. And in that moment, Mark realized something wasn't just in this for the business deal anymore. He was in this because he had fallen for her. He cared for her deeply, and he wasn't going to let her face her fears alone. "I promise," he whispered, his voice steady. "We're in this together, no matter what." And for the first time in weeks, Eleanor let herself believe him. She leaned into him, her arms wrapping around him, finding solace in the warmth of his embrace. The next day, things began to change. Eleanor, no longer willing to live in the shadows of fear, took a stand. She faced the media head-on, addressing the rumors and the pressure that had been mounting. It wasn't easy, but she did it. And for the first time in a long time, she felt the weight lifting off her shoulders. Mark stood by her side, as promised, offering his support and strength. He knew they had a long road ahead of them, but for the first time, it felt like they were moving in the right direction. The road wasn't going to be easy, but with each other, they could face whatever came next. Stay tuned to see how Mark and Eleanor continue to fight for their future and whether their love can survive the challenges that are yet to come. The days that followed were a new chapter for Mark and Eleanor. After the media storm had passed and the pressure had begun to ease, they found themselves in a place they hadn't anticipated together, truly together. Eleanor had faced the truth, and with Mark by her side, she had reclaimed control of her narrative. No longer was she the woman hiding behind a wall of wealth and power. She was a woman who had allowed herself to be vulnerable, to trust, and to love. Mark, too, had changed. What began as a business arrangement had transformed into something real, something undeniable. He had fallen for Eleanor, not for her wealth, but for the woman she was beneath it all, the strong, intelligent woman who had shown him that love could be found in the most unexpected places. One evening, after a quiet dinner, Mark and Eleanor sat together on the balcony of the mansion. The night sky stretched out before them. The city below twinkled in the distance, but for the first time in what felt like forever, they were at peace. The world around them no longer seemed so threatening, so filled with pressure. Eleanor turned to Mark, a small smile on her lips. "You know," she began softly, "when we started this, I never imagined we'd get to this point. I thought I could control everything. But now, I realize that I've been trying to control the wrong things." Mark reached for her hand, his heart full. "And what's the right thing?" he asked, his voice warm. Eleanor's smile deepened as she looked at him, her eyes filled with affection and something deeper. "The right thing is letting go. Letting go of the fear. Letting go of the past. And embracing what we have now." Mark nodded, squeezing her hand. "I couldn't agree more." For the first time since they had met, they both felt truly free. Free from the expectations of others, free from the weight of their pasts, and free to build a future on their own terms. They had fought for this moment, for their relationship, and now they could finally live it. Weeks passed, and as their connection deepened, Mark and Eleanor found themselves facing the next step in their journey, one that no longer involved pretending, no longer involved hiding behind the contract that had once brought them together. They were ready for a new chapter, a chapter where they were no longer bound by a business agreement, but by love. One evening, as the sun set over the horizon, Mark took Eleanor's hand once again. This time, he looked at her with a sense of certainty, a certainty that he had never felt before. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears as she looked at him, the weight of his words sinking in. She had come so far, from the woman who was afraid to trust, to the woman who now knew that love, real love, was the one thing she couldn't control but could fully embrace. With a soft smile, Eleanor nodded. "I love you too, Mark. And I'm not going anywhere either." As they stood there, hand in hand, they both knew that they had found something more precious than any business deal or social contract. They had found each other. And that was more than enough. Stay tuned to see how Mark and Eleanor continue to build their future together, and whether their love will continue to grow as they face the challenges of life side by side. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more heartfelt stories. Until next time.